Okay, you're looking at my Thorny Turtle Ranch channel, which is primarily features maybe some turtles, but also my life. I'm sitting here with a gentleman I spent a few weeks with at his house. We're working on some projects with his son. His son is Kevin, who's on another YouTube channel. A lot of good stories with Kevin. I call him Kevin the Texas Welder, and I'm in Texas right here. This is Mr. Cates, David Cates, and David and I sat next to each other for several meals, most every single day, for the last few weeks, and I've spent some evenings with him, and he's got fascinating stories, and I've enjoyed my time with him. And I asked him if he wouldn't mind doing an interview, and he thought that would be a good idea. He wanted to specifically talk about some special things, and I thought that was good. He is going through some health issues. He does take some dialysis regularly, and that may be related to some of the story we're going to tell you about, how it came to be that he has some health issues. We're just going to go ahead and start. So I guess tell us about growing up and leading into this other things that we're going to talk about.
Well, I grew up in North Carolina, the middle of the state, a place called Durham, and called the Piedmont area. Reason why I went in the Navy, actually, I'd not planned on going into service. Let's see, 69, I remember doing a civics paper on careers in the Air Force. Big thing was Vietnam was going on a bit hot and heavy back then, and it was a hoorah type of atmosphere, you know. But at the same time, a lot of civil rights issues began, protests at the colleges, Tet Offensive, Vietnam, a lot of stuff. And my whole mindset changed from a standpoint of a 14-year-old in 1968 to the time I joined the service in 1973. My brother had been in the Navy back during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and so I had changed my mind about Air Force to not going in at all to join the Navy. And so back and forth, when you're 18, 19 years old, how many people really know what they want to do? And so joined the Navy. My brother had told me, hey, if you can get through boot camp, because I asked him to give me any good advice. He said, if you can get through the Navy, get through boot camp, it's fine. Two things I would tell you. He said, keep your nose clean and don't get a tattoo. Because he had 2 tattoos, one on each arm.
Wow.
And I was always real proud of his tattoos. So anyway, he started out, like I said, boot camp. Well, after being there for the first 2 weeks, I thought it was the worst mistake I'd ever made in my life, because I just could not believe how bad people were to each other, and all the exercises that we had to do. I literally had calluses on the inside of my big toes that lasted 4 years, and I used to have to shave them off just from the boot camp. Just from boot camp. We literally did 500 jumping jacks a day, and it was a lot. And I went in at 173, came out at 180, and I was pretty much all muscle by then. I got assigned to A school, and which was to become an aviation electrician's mate, and 22-week course in Jacksonville, Florida. And upon graduation from that, I had wanted to get into a P3 squadron, which is patrol planes. That way I could be part of aircrew, and also meant I didn't have to be attached to a ship. But because my grades were good in classes in the Navy, but not good enough to get my first choice. So I got assigned to a fighter squadron on board an aircraft carrier, the John F. Kennedy, and I actually was assigned to work on the very first F14s.
The first ones that ever were put into service.
Well, we had a training squadron out in California, San Diego, where the VF-124, that was the first squadron. We were the first ones on the East Coast.
Okay.
So, and I remember having a brand new hangar back in 1974. Brand new aircraft showed up. We had the first ones, us and a sister squadron, VF-14. I was in VF-32. They called us the Fighting Swordsman. And so, like I said, I love working on Tomcats. And for those of you who don't know what Tomcats are, If you ever saw the first movie that Tom Cruise came out, that's what he flew, F-14 Tomcats. Or the second movie where he went to wherever it was at, and I think it was Russia or whatever, and found one Tomcat there in the hangar and flew it out. Well, I worked on it before Tom Cruise made it popular, so that's what I always told people, and in the first place. But anyway, I loved working on the aircraft. I had a good time. What Steve is talking about, one of the instances that we had when I was out at sea, November 22nd, 1975, our chaplain that came over, the 1MC, which is an intercom, that night, and said something about, gave the prayer, and so it was like 10:10 or whatever it was at night. We were having flight ops taking place, and he said 12 years ago our namesake was shot and killed in Dallas, Texas. Now I'm talking 1975. And so I remember hearing that on the intercom, and I had volunteered to work temporary in our crud crew paint shop. We're standing and painted airplanes, just because I wanted to do something else other than always just work on aircraft as an electrician. So for the 3-month period there, I was assigned to what we call crud crew, and standing and painting planes, wiping them down with all types of potent chemicals. You can name a lot of stuff. But that night, November 22nd, I heard general quarters, all hands man your battle stations. And I was working in the hangar bay, the hangar deck. And I saw the entire elevator bay fill up with gray. And because I'm standing right by it. And me being 21 years old at the time, not totally aware of everything that was going on, I thought we were in a thick fog. Just seeing everything fill up with total gray. Never in a million years would I thought a ship had come that close to us. Mm-hmm. And then I felt the ship shudder as it left us at the tail end of the ship. And but because they'd announced general quarters, everybody's running trying to get to their battle stations. And primarily mine at the time, you go to your shop, do a muster, head count, and be sure everybody's okay. And I accounted for it. And we were, and I remember what the heck is going on. I opened one of 2 portholes on our entire ship. We happened to have one in our shop. And the entire sky was lighting up. And I don't know if you've ever seen, like, to me it was an old picture of Francis Scott Key when he wrote the Star Spangled Banner. And it was a picture of bombs bursting in the air and all this kind of stuff. But the entire sky was lighting up. And the sounds, explosions, it was just horrendous. And once we took muster, I stepped out of the shop, I saw people manning fire hoses. And like I said, I didn't know any of the people across the hangar bay. I just asked the chief. I saw them putting OBAs on people, oxygen breathing apparatus. And I said, okay, it's been 2 years since I was in firefighting school. Can you give me a heads up on using this? It's a 45-minute canister, and once you pull the pin, do not stay in for 45 minutes. And so I was in there for like 36 minutes once I pulled the pin, and we're just marching into this smoke-filled compartment. It's on fire, flames, and everything else. And I remember seeing charred bodies brought on board from the other ship where they got blown off and on fire. And it was, like I said, it was pretty horrendous. And as we stepped into the hatchway, and I don't know if you can picture this, but you had hoses that were pumping the water out of the ship, because you're putting water on a fire and everything is in hatches on the ship, which meant it's got nowhere to go. So they have to pump it out. And so I'm standing knee-deep water along with everybody else, just like us. And hot, and you can't see anything because this OBA that you got on has got little eyelets that you have to look to see what's in front of you. You tap the guy in front, a guy's behind you to tap each other so you'll know where each other's at, because you can't see anything. like I said, it's smoke filled except for the flames they're shooting out. And like I said, I stayed in there 36 minutes. I didn't make it to the nozzle, which is close to the front, but I was like 9 or 10 feet from the fire as it was raging above our heads. And because the compartment that we were in was full of computer equipment, tires, wheels, rags. It was a materials place, shop, department. And guys were taking gauges, put them on the wheels to see how hot they were, because if they were at point of ignition, magnesium you don't put out. And so they were almost to the point of ignition. They'd roll them over the side of the ship. And we were 70 miles off the coast of Sicily when this happened, so it wasn't like, if you don't try to put the fire out, something bad's going to happen. So, and none of us wanted to sink. And like I said, it was an aircraft carrier. About 4,500 guys, something like this at the time. And
how bad was that magnesium? Could it have burned through burned through the whole freaking ship?
Well, you don't put them out.
Yeah, you can't put them out.
How many wheels do you want to catch on fire?
Oh, so it was wheels, magnesium wheels.
Because that's what we put on the aircraft.
Well, if there was a whole big old stack, it'd go right through the ship.
And there were. And at the same time, like I said, they rolled the wheels, tires off the ship. And there's a lot of toxic stuff around, because you have various things that are burning. Yeah. And we've got asbestos up in the rafters of on the ceiling of the ship. And things are falling all over you. It wasn't like we had the most protective fire gear, because I wasn't a fireman. I just grabbed a hose to try to put the fire out. Right. And so the only thing I had on protective for me was just the OBA that was covering my face. And the same as most of these guys. You know, it wasn't like we had gear on. Right. And so I can tell you that after this was over, and at flight deck, you had, when this ship went by us, it ruptured the avgas storage tanks, sheared off catwalks and radar antenna, and the fuel poured back in the ship, and that's what started the fire. Wow. And it also poured on the other ship that was going by us. Okay. And so it blew up. And you can look on the website and you can see USS JFK and USS Belknap was the name of the ship that ran into us. And,
were you guys traveling together or anything, or was it?
It's a carrier group.
So it was a carrier group. Yeah, somebody just got.
It's a few ships, and the other ship was my understanding, taking a position at the rear of our ship in case a pilot crashed, they could pick him up. Okay, it's like what they call
a pilot for a plane.
Plane guard, whatever they call him back then. And it's just they would pick up a place like a mile after the ship, and they were on their way back to that, is my understanding. Wow. But they experienced the general quarters, and I don't know if that meant they lost their steering. It's too many years gone by. But anyway, they ran into our ship, hit the angle deck of our aircraft carrier, and went straight under the side and sheared that stuff that I told you off, and created mass havoc. A lot of fire, a lot of explosion. And of course, flames were shooting up on the side of the aircraft carrier. We had planes sitting there parked.
Did any planes get burned up?
No, because our plane captains moved them out of the way fast. Oh, wow. But they were pulling with tow trucks. Plane captains were taking these aircraft away from the side of the ship where these flames were at. And I don't know if there was any of that damage from them or not. Like I said, our plane captains did an excellent job moving the aircraft that fast. It could have been so much more catastrophic than it was. Right. As it was, after this was over, don't remember the number of people that died. I'm going to say 6 or 8 people. One guy on our ship, the others were on the other. Maybe, I'll make the number up, you have to look it up, maybe 16 people were wounded severely. Others were 40, something like this, were put in sick bay. And it was just and that's me sugarcoating the numbers. I know it was higher than that. But it was just a major, major problem. And I remember after this thing was over, hours went by. My mother, when I got back home, because back then you couldn't email or phone your parents to tell them you're okay. We had to write a letter. Mm-hmm. And so it took her a week to get our mail. Our squadron CEO had told us when we got back to our bunks to be sure to write a letter immediately to let your parents know you're okay, or your loved ones.
Right.
And my mother told me she had aged 25 years in a week waiting for that letter to come back.
Yeah.
And and at the same time, my grandmother had told her that she had seen on the news that night, because my mother was at work, had told her, hey, isn't David on the JFK, the John F. Kennedy? And my mother said, yeah. She said, well, I just saw where they were in a collision in the Mediterranean. And like I said, Vietnam was still, Vietnam had just
winded down.
Yeah, just in May of '75 was when it officially ceased.
Yeah.
And this was in November '75.
Right.
So we had Russian warships as well as part of the exercise, watching what's going on.
Yeah.
And anyway, I can remember after this was over, a number of hours later, I'm standing there talking to one of my fellow shipmates, and we all smelled like horrendous, smelled like smoke, and our uniforms couldn't be saved. My boondockers, I remember throwing them away.
Wow.
They were so waterlogged. And like I say, within a couple of days of that time frame, I can't remember exactly when, we pulled into another port. We were supposed to go into Catania, Sicily, but we pulled in Augusta Bay, Sicily. And
now you were sick though immediately after that fire from.
That's what I'm gonna tell you. We pulled into a place to redo the ship, and where I was part of a working party, and you're sanding, scraping all the charred effects from the ship that had burned in that compartment.
Right.
And just picture yourself inside a burned out building. Well, this was on a ship, and they were piping in oxygen through like something maybe 6, I don't even know if it was oxygen, piping in air, whatever it was, through a hose, because you're in a compartment that's nothing but paint fumes and charred, blackened residue. And like I said, we're getting all this stuff out of the ship, and then we started painting it afterwards. And I can remember, and this is where I used to make fun of this because I thought it was a funny thing. We would take a 5-gallon bucket of orange lead-based paint, and I'm painting this side, the bulkhead, the side of the ship, where we had just scraped and got all this charred material off of it. And I took this roller, whatever it was, 6-foot handle on it, and I'm dipping in the bucket and putting it on the bucket, and next thing I know, and I took the roller and stuck it in the bulkhead again, and the roller was disappearing, and I had never seen anything like that, and I thought it was real, and I tapped the guy beside me, Jim. I said, watch this. And I took the roller, dipped it in the paint bucket, painted the wall, bulkhead, and all of a sudden the roller just disappeared again. I saw it just as perfect as that roller, and just pulled it in and out, and it was going in the side of that ship. And I didn't understand why he didn't see it. And then next thing I know, I started seeing all types of colors. And if you had seen the movie Fantasia, where it's like a splash of colors here and there, that whole side of the bulkhead was doing that. And that's this guy yelled at somebody to get him out of here. He's high as a kite. Yeah. And so they took me out and spun some paneling. Long story short, there, the next morning was the worst headache I'd ever had. Yeah. And
lots of toxins.
So I had no idea what paint fumes could do to you. Yeah. But I found out. And like I said, combination paint fumes, whatever happened during the fire. And all of a sudden, we found out decades later, almost 2 years ago, my kidneys stopped working, and then I ended up, so that's why I'm on dialysis now. Very fortunate I'm still around. And
yeah.
I've had
quite a few
doctors tell me that.
Close calls with maybe leaving the earth, huh?
I would tell you, and I would tell anybody that's watching this, they found cancer, multiple myeloma, and they said that's what caused it, and caused the kidneys to fail, and supposedly that stuff can lie dormant for decades, and then it raises its nasty head and comes at you. And so that's what has been attributed to causing this problem from that those incidents back then, so many years ago.
Yeah.
And even though at the time we took precautions the best we knew how, but again, all the fire equipment in the world, you're trying to put a fire out so that you don't sink, and then you're trying to get the ship ready to get underway, and you're taking orders, following what you're supposed to follow. But all I was going to tell you, the way they found, I would tell any of your viewers to do this, the way they found my cancer, that hadn't been found earlier, but I went to a dentist for a checkup or cleanup.
Oh yeah,
cleaning.
That's right.
And after they did like a little 3D scene of my jaw, they found a little, like a bullet hole in my mandible. And they said like a 22 size bullet hole. And asked me if I'd experienced any symptoms. I said, no, not really. And I said, maybe once in a while I'd touch it and I could feel like a little tuning fork going off, but I never really thought anything was wrong. Because it didn't happen all the time.
Right.
And they told me to go get a biopsy. I went to get a biopsy, and that's when they found multiple myeloma.
Wow.
And so I would tell your viewers, don't forget to go to the dentist.
Yeah,
you
dentist.
never know what they can find.
Yeah.
And that has very much assisted me. Fortunately, they told me it was I was very far down the road, which I wouldn't have known. All I knew, because by the time they tested my body and had to go through PET scans and all this other kind of stuff, they found my joints had cancer in them. And this type of cancer I got is it makes your bones porous.
Yeah.
So I have to be careful to not do a lot physical just because I can snap or break something. As a matter of fact, I used to play golf, and the doctors don't even want me to swing a club.
Right.
Because they feel like I can break a bone or joints. And
wow.
so
Well,
it's just a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But fortunately, like I said, I'm in remission right now. But once you have cancer, you always have cancer.
Oh yeah. Well, we get it every day.
Yeah, but it stays. It's just a matter. They've driven it very far down. I've had a stem cell transplant. Like I say, I'm grateful. I'm doing.
Yeah,
I'm doing real good.
Your
hair's coming back. So
pretty amazing with your recovery.
I've been very blessed.
Thanks so much for your story on that. We're going to talk a little more. I'm just going to end this one.
Okay.
Because we'll get into some other topics. So I've really enjoyed my time with you the last few weeks, talking with you, and I think we have a lot of things in common, the way we kind of look at the world maybe, and whatnot. So everybody else, like, subscribe, share, and check out the channel here. And there's other stories. Matter of fact, Mr. Cates watched another story of my deceased friend, Mr. Brown, and his World War II time, but also it's a story about a racehorse, and it brought me to tears. It brought him to tears too, didn't it? I guess.
Flavor.
Yeah, Flavor. So it's a story about Flavor the racehorse back in the 30s. It's an amazing story. And anyway, check out the channel. Thanks again for viewing. And thanks, Mr. Cates, for your information, and we'll get on to some other stories here.